Support for Amplified Voices comes from the Restorative Action Foundation. Learn more at restorativeactionalliance.org.
Everyone has a voice, a story to tell. Some are marginalized and muted. What if there were a way to amplify those stories? To have conversations with real people in real communities? A way to help them step into the power of their lived experience. Welcome to Amplified Voices, a podcast lifting the experiences of people and families impacted by the criminal legal system. Together, we can create positive change for everyone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Amplified Voices. I'm your host, Jason, here with my co-host, Amber. Good morning, Amber.
Good morning, Jason.
Hey, Amber, today we have our first couple on the podcast. It's Joe and Amy. Good morning, Joe and Amy.
Good morning. How are you?
It's great to have you here. So we're going to start by asking Joe to tell us a little bit about your life before the criminal legal system and what brought you into it.
So I actually grew up in Michigan. I had a pretty normal childhood. Nothing crazy, nothing traumatic. Both parents were married my entire life. My dad worked a swing shift, so he was coming and going a lot, pretty frequently, which wasn't normal, I guess, in my neighborhood.
Brothers and sisters?
I have one brother, no sisters. We went on vacations when we could. We weren't rich. We were more of a middle-class family.
What kind of things did you do for fun when you were younger?
Growing up back then, and I would say the late 80s, early 90s, it was a typical childhood growing up in a neighborhood full of kids the same age. We all played from wake up until we went to bed and the streetlights came on. The only time we came back home was for lunch, maybe, and we had to be home for 5 o'clock dinner every night. And then back outside again until the lights came on. We did everything. We had a field behind my house, so we would play football, baseball, street hockey, you name it. We did it growing up. We caused some problems, but nothing that I wouldn't say kids didn't cause, you know.
So you were one of the neighborhood kids just hanging out, doing what kids did in the 80s and 90s. And then school, were you a student? Were you into sports? Were you into music? What was your thing?
As my wife will confirm, I am not musically inclined. I'm what I would call the dumb jock growing up. In school, I was a C student. I was in some special ed classes for math and science. I played football. I ran track. I was captain of both teams. I'm very athletic, maybe not now, but I was very athletic. And, that's just what I enjoyed doing. I struggled at school a little bit, but I made my way through it. C student. I always say C's get you degrees, and so do D's sometimes. I attempted college right out of high school. I didn't like it. So I opted to not go to college and focus on working and making money, decide what I wanted to do for a living. I had a teacher that actually in high school that told me I would probably be really good at law enforcement. And I kind of laughed at him back then. And then after high school, I was like, it does interest me really a lot. So I majored in criminal justice, and sadly, I never graduated with that degree, but it actually got me into law enforcement. I did an internship with a local agency. I fell more in love with it. So I really put a focus on that. And through hard work and dedication and a lot of luck, I would say, I actually became a cop.
So you were a police officer for how many years?
I was a police officer for actually 3 years exactly. I actually left the force forced off the force.
Forced off the force. So I think is this the right time to get into it? What happened?
Yeah. So I went into law enforcement. I became a sheriff in the area, and I was working sometimes in a jail, sometimes the court. Sometimes I would do other things for them, and I was doing really well. I was liked by my command staff. I was liked by my fellow officers. We used to play jokes on people when they would leave the computer to go places. We would, a lot of people would just leave the sign on the computers. And as jokes, a lot of times we would play jokes on other officers. We would, post on their Facebook feeds or MySpace if it was still around back then and stuff like that, that they were coming out of the closet, or just jokes that, weren't harmful to people. but they can make you mad sometimes.
It was a frat-like culture.
Yeah, we were a lot of young officers. It was pretty young force. I mean, it was kind of a frat-like environment,
Yeah.
Especially in the jails. We really had nothing to do besides harass people, each other, not inmates, each other. And yeah, they kind of took on a frat-like environment where it was free for all.
What ages you were? 20?
I was 25, I think, when I started. I think I ended up leaving the force when I was like 28, I believe. So it was going great. I did work in the court for a little while too. And that's kind of where I learned the justice system and how I viewed it as a twisted system. I started losing faith in it when I was working in the court. When I would see for people who I believe were firmly innocent people get convicted and go to jail. And I started looking at that and watching prosecutors and defense attorneys going out to lunch together and laughing about stuff. And I'm like, this isn't normal. This isn't right. It shouldn't be like this.
So did that create like an identity crisis for you? You're thinking like, are we the baddies?
It kind of did. It also made me more compassionate, I would say, towards the inmates and kind of understand them a little better. And I would just talk to them about their problems and what was going on and try to give them advice that if you want to change your life, only you can change it. And the best way to change it is don't go back to the same environment you were in that got you in this situation, because that's all it's going to do.
And so, Joe, I think what I'm hearing is there started to be a certain awareness when you were working in the courts of some of the injustices of the system. As someone who was on the front end of that system, how did that inform the way that you interacted with people as a police officer?
It made me more aware of how twisted the system is and how the media also only releases the information they want you to see and hear. But as far as how it impacted me in everyday life, as far as meeting people, talking to people, inmates, stuff like that, it just made me more aware of them and that they're not horrible people. And they just made horrible mistakes. And they got caught up in a system that is not out to help them. It's just out to hold them back and hurt them. And that was my biggest thing when I would talk to people that were incarcerated as I was working there, was try to talk to people and help them realize if you are in a bad situation that got you here, the only way to get out of that situation is to do it for yourself. And you have to change your life and who you hang around with. And I always joked with them, not really joke with them, but told them, are those people visiting you in jail? Probably not. If they're not visiting you in jail, are they really your friends and your family? Because your friends and your family, the true ones, are the ones that come to jail and visit you. The ones that put money on your books, the ones that help you out. And if they're not here doing that, they're probably not good to have around you. That's how I would say it changed my view on the system, was that you're not innocent until proven guilty. You're more guilty until proven innocent in this country now. Are we really doing what's best for these people? We're not helping them. We're hurting them.
Right.
And that kind of what changed my thought.
And so what happened that brought you even closer to a fuller understanding of the system?
Everything was going great in my life. I mean, I was making good money. I was young. I was living a kind of a wild life, kind of a fast life. I was drinking quite a bit socially with my friends after work. And I got a phone call one day from my mom, asked me if I was sitting down, and I was like, okay, yeah. And she's like, well, your dad's going to go to the hospital. He's not feeling good. He's tingling in his feet. And I was like, okay, well, my dad's not a hospital person, not a doctor person. I said, okay, well, just keep me updated. I'm at work. Just keep me updated if something happens, but he should be fine. 4 hours later in my shift, I got another phone call from my mom, who I thought was just going to be a, hey, we're out of the hospital phone call. And it was, hey, I got to talk to you about something. I said, okay. And she's like, your dad's paralyzed. And I'm like, wait a minute. My dad drove to the hospital. My dad walked into the hospital. How is my dad paralyzed? And we went through this whole story and everything happened. And at that point, he was diagnosed a few days later with stage 4 cancer. So I was able to take out FMLA and I was able to travel to and from where the state they were in and spend time with my dad and really, sorry, it's hard.
It's okay.
Um,
No, take the time you need.
Bond with him and spend time with him. During that time period, I was going through a lot. I was still working, and I was traveling, I would say 3 or 4 times in 2 months that I would go to and from that state. I had free reign to do that. My command staff was very understanding, very supportive of it. So they were great. When I came back home, my dad had passed away and I took some time off work. I came back to work about a week after my dad passed. And I started noticing kind of weird messages popped up on my instant messengers for people's names I didn't really recognize. But at the same time, like I said, I was kind of living a pretty fast life in a way. I was meeting a lot of people, whether it be out in public or it be at bars, whether it be online, I was single. I was trying to get a girlfriend or something, and at the time I had no kids and I 27, 20 years old. I had a good job. I had no kids. I had, I was kind of a catch at the time, I guess you would say, and I was trying to find someone and I was meeting lots of people. So random names popping up on my instant messenger wasn't really a red flag. I didn't think nothing of it. After a while, it was kind of like, okay, well, this is kind of getting weird. I had one that popped up a few times and a couple times here and there, and I would make small talk and nothing big. I wouldn't ask to meet up with this person, nothing like that. Never exchange pictures of nudity or anything. And then randomly about 2.5 weeks after my dad had passed away and I went back to work, I got a knock on my door and it ended up being internet crime at my apartment. And it threw me for a loop at first. I was like, hey guys, come on in. What do you guys need? I thought they were just working in the area and they just happened to stop in my house. So I was just welcome them in my house. Come on in. What are you guys doing in the area? And they said, well, we got to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And they said, well, you anywhere we can sit. Everything kind of changed at that point. And that's when they enlightened me that they said me, but then they said, or somebody that may have gained access to your accounts we're talking to a minor. And that time I was honestly just kind of blown away. I was like, oh, okay, well, I can guarantee you I haven't done nothing. If you need anything like laptops, cell phones, anything you need, I'll give it to you. I'm going to prove I'm innocent here. And they said, okay. And they said, we have a warrant. And I was like, you don't need the warrant. I'll give you anything you need. And they said, okay. So they sat down, we talked. And everything that we talked about, because I was law enforcement, we are allowed a little bit of leeway with what we say. And I was told it was not going to be put on the record. I said, okay. And I talked to them, openly, freely. They searched my apartment. I gave them everything they needed. Like I said, I told them, you don't need a warrant. You have anything you want, and at that point, I started realizing, wait a minute, these instant messengers that were popping up, not knowing who they were, pretty stupid on my behalf to talk to these people without asking other questions.
And just for clarity here, these chats took a sexual.
Yes, some of them. Well, yeah, some of them did, but not really. They weren't. My chats were not in a sexual real nature, and that's kind of where I was confused. I was blown away. Like why? If I did talk to somebody who was underage, I know I didn't try to meet them. I know I wasn't trying to hook up with them. I know I wasn't asking for nudes. I know I wasn't doing any of this stuff. So I didn't break a law. Why are you here? And, they said, well, you're talking to a minor. I said, okay, but if I'm just talking to somebody, I'm not breaking a law. And they said, well, the nature of some of these conversations that we've seen, like, again, you can have my laptop, you can have my cell phones, you can do anything you want with them. I'm not doing anything wrong. I ended up being moved to a different jail to work on what's called like a punishment area. And I sat there for 6 months working every day, doing my job as if normal and not hearing anything. And then one day I got a phone called from the union steward letting me know that they're pressing charges against me. It's like, again, I'm shocked. I'm blown away. It's been 6 months. I'm not doing anything wrong. And now I'm facing charges for something that I don't fully understand. I turned myself in. I did all the things I had to do. And the biggest thing was when I went to court, internet crime stood there. And when they're talking about my bond, originally it was supposed to be set very high. And internet crime spoke in court to the judge and stated that they did not believe I would be a flight risk. They did not believe that I'm going to do any harm to anybody. They did not believe that I actually did anything wrong. And they said when they had searched my computer and searched my phone, they were the cleanest phone and computer they've ever searched. The only messages that were in a sexual nature were messages that were taken from my work computer. And that's kind of when the light bulb really got bright on me. And I realized those jokes we were doing as like the frat boy jokes of just, hey, Joe's coming out of the closet, blah, blah, blah. Those escalated and those turned into a joke gone wrong, or so I thought. And it got me in trouble. And I actually chose to fight the prosecutor because I firmly felt that I did nothing wrong. So if it's not on my home computer, it's not on my cell phone, it's only on a work computer that I shared with other people, even though it's on my sign-on, I can beat this case.
So I have a couple of questions and thoughts, if you'll indulge me, if you don't mind. So one of the things that struck me was this idea that, so first of all, when internet crimes came to your home, these are people that you either know or know of, because essentially these are colleagues. Are these colleagues of yours? Is it a different department of people that you don't know? What did that look like?
They worked in the same building as me. I knew them. I knew them by name. I knew them by first name. My mom actually met these people.
Right.
After my dad had passed away, the commanding officer in my jail that I worked in granted my mother a pass to take a tour of the jail so she could see it. And she met them.
Yeah. So my follow-up to that is, and because we do try to have some difficult conversations here on Amplified Voices, because you were in law enforcement, do you feel that there was a different way that your case was handled?
Yeah. So they didn't storm my house with a SWAT team. They didn't show up with 10 guys like they probably would have for any normal situation. They showed up with one lieutenant, and they showed up with 2 internet crime officers, and that was it. It was just 3 people, and I knew all 3 people. I think internet crime actually was standing up for me, and they were legitimately trying to say he's not this person, and fell on deaf ears. So yeah, I believe I was given special treatment. I was still allowed to work for 6 months. And then when it became time that the prosecutor really got involved, then it kind of became a let's get them kind of mentality. I feel like I became the patsy. I became the fall boy. They wanted to get somebody, and They thought they could get me. And they thought I would just crumble down and just give up and say, okay, I'm done. I quit. I always was taught to fight for what was right. It's a lesson my dad always taught me.
Yeah.
Throughout the family, I got a good lawyer. My lawyer actually is and was a prosecutor for other counties and the areas around me. I mean, he did the best he could. And I fought and we fought. We dragged this thing on for 6 or 8 months fighting to try to prove my innocence. And at one point, we had a very, very good agreement that I was going to plead down to a misdemeanor and no registry. And all I had to do was quit my job and walk away. And I was either that or I was facing 12 or 14 years, some of that in jail. So I was going to do it. But then when that went up the ladder to the head prosecutor, that was a no-go. They denied it.
So you're standing firm, and you also know that if you are convicted and you go to prison, it's going to be quite an interesting thing for somebody who was in law enforcement to be incarcerated, right?
Yeah, because again, I worked in the court. I've seen people go to jail, seen people go to prison who I believe were innocent. And I've heard jurors say they must be guilty because the cops got them, or I don't want to be here, so they must be guilty. I just want to go home. And I knew that. And I also knew that being a sex offense, I'm going to be classified the worst of the worst. And being ex-law enforcement at that point, that's even worse. I might not ever leave prison. I might not ever leave. We continued to fight, and it finally came down to my option was I'd take the case to trial, face up to the 14 years in prison, or I could take this plea that was given to me the day or 2 days before the court. That would be 6 months county jail, 4 years probation, but I had to register as a sex offender, even though my crime at the time was not a registerable offense. They were going to make me register anyway. So,
and for what length of time?
25 years. So I talked it over with my family, and it was a hard decision. But as my family told me, I'm never really a gambling person, and I know how the legal system would work. It would be a no-brainer for me to probably just accept the plea, do my time, get out, and start rebuilding my life. I know how to, quote unquote, do time in jail. I watch everybody do it. I knew how to lay low. I knew what to say, what not to say.
So how was reality versus your expectation?
So I argued back, I would accept this, but I want to be guaranteed court order protective custody for my own safety. And I was granted that. Now, let's fast forward to the day that I was sentenced. Even the judge gave me tons of leeway as far as I was found guilty, and I asked to go to jail that day. And the judge actually told me no. The judge said, I want you to go home. I want you to have 1 month to gather your life and get things in order before you go to jail. And I'm giving you that professional courtesy, which kind of blew me away. Again, I got some courtesy in the legal system that most people would have never got that courtesy. Hey, you're guilty, but you can go home.
I really appreciate you sharing those things and laying them out, because I think the story is really important. And it does underscore that the system, once it sort of starts rolling, it's a train that is very difficult to stop, regardless of who you are. So when you say protective custody, is this like what a lot of people like to call admin separation? Would you consider it solitary confinement? Briefly, just tell us what that means.
We had a form of protective custody, which actually was just segregation. I was put into a cell. It's called a kind of a KPS type cell. If we had any high profile people, that's where they would go. I would have had my own bathroom. I would have had my own TV. I would have had everything. And that to me was my safety net. I spent all of about 6 hours in that actual cell before the head sheriff decided to move me against my will to a different county to do the rest of my time. I knew I was safe where I was.
Yeah.
And they said I wasn't safe. They said that I was an escape risk, which I laughed because I had 6 months. Why am I running? So they almost forcefully moved me. They surrounded me with about 4 or 5 officers. And that's when I asked what was going on. And they told me I was going to move. And I tried to fight that. And I lost that fight too. So I told them, I said, you don't got to do this. You don't got to surround me by officers. I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just take me. So they moved me to a different county that was over an hour away. And that was hard because now I'm over an hour away from my family.
Right.
Don't want to drive over an hour to see me. That was my thought.
Right.
So yeah, it was tough.
What is the time that elapsed that you were incarcerated?
When they moved me from my county to another county, the county I was being housed in, they had no control over me. They had to do whatever my county said to do with me. Nobody kind of knew what was going on. I would ask for my out date, and I would get the letter back saying I had no out date. And everybody has an out date. Why don't I have an out date? It's because that county had no right over me. They were just holding me for somebody else. So I couldn't get no information. And I had to take an officer out of the area and talk to that person in private and let them know who I was, where I was from, and what was going on with me. And when I enlightened the officer, he was like, oh, you're the guy. You're the one that's here. And I said, yeah, it's me. And he was like, yeah, a bunch of us looked at your stuff. We don't understand why you're here. And, well, I don't either, but, I'm here.
So at some point you get released and then you are single and you're on probation, right? And you meet a woman.
Yeah. So I got released. I was on probation. I was registered, and I was also doing treatment classes, and I got a job. I was working at a restaurant, and I met a girl there, and we just started talking as friends. She reached out to me one night on New Year's and said that her boyfriend just broke up with her. And I said, okay, well,
on New
I was at
Year's,
my cousin's house.
on New Year's,
He
broke up with you on New Year's.
He did. Yeah. I had a not great on and off relationship, I guess. But, from my perspective, I had known Joe for about a year because I had worked with him in the restaurant, knew he was a stand-up guy, honestly thought he was married because I'm like, how could, this type of guy not already have somebody? Because, he's just very kind, just a great person to work with. And yeah, we started talking a little bit and things kind of went well. I just admired who he was as a person, and I started to fall in love with him.
So you reached out to him and said, I need a New Year's date.
Yeah, I just wanted somebody to talk to.
Okay.
That's all it was. I just wanted somebody to talk to. From there, like we started dating, and honestly,
well, I actually told her on the first date.
Yeah.
I told her the very first date what was going on with me, that I was on the registry. This is what happened. So I didn't want to start something that have it come out later.
Right.
And then destroy the whole relationship. If it's going to destroy the relationship, let's just destroy it right now.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important for anyone who has any type of history, like just just get it out at first, because if that person knows you, like in our example, like I knew him for about a year before I knew what type of person he was. Like, I was just shocked when he told me. I'm like, no, that's not you. That is not possible. And like, from there, like, I was like, you know what, this is ridiculous. And from what you had told me, I really want to, even if things don't work out, like, I'm going to be here for you. But I mean, luckily for us, it's been 12 years, and where this is our 10th year anniversary. We're celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary this year.
Amy, was there a moment where you thought to yourself, no, I'm not doing this? Like, I'm not. I
thought it was wrong. Like, I thought he got trapped up and screwed over by the legal system because of technicalities. When we first got together, like, I knew he was living with a family member at the time, and he was having some problems with him. So he wanted to try and move out into housing. And I know at that time it was a struggle.
At the time, Michigan had in their registry requirements, you couldn't live within a quarter mile of school. Well, we lived at the time in a pretty big area. There are schools that are everywhere. It made finding a place to live pretty difficult, even an apartment.
So I had always lived with family before I met Joe, and we just decided to move in together.
I have a question, actually. So because you were under supervision at the time, were there requirements that you had to follow in either treatment or probation to disclose you were having a relationship? Was there anything that was required of your partner in order to be in that relationship?
At the time, I had a very, very strict probation officer. She actually did not like the fact that I was former law enforcement. Mm-hmm. She actually told me to my face she didn't like it, and that I thought I was better than her. She didn't like me, and she advised me not to date anybody. This is like the first time I ever met her. And I said, whatever, I'm single anyway. Then when I met Amy, everything kind of changed. And I actually asked Amy if she would be willing to come with me to one of my probation meetings with my probation officer, just so they could meet. But she met my probation officer, and it didn't go as bad as I thought it would, actually. She didn't have a problem with Amy. And then I got a new probation officer, and that person was really good. That person was very, very lenient and everything. And again, Amy met her too. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't forced to do that. I just did that because I felt like this is the best avenue to go. And then we decided that we were going to find a house. And that whole problem came up again with where to live. And, we found a house, and it was a great house. We did get married. And at one point, we were on our honeymoon, and found out when we got back from our honeymoon that somebody found out in the neighborhood, and they went door to door in the neighborhood with a flyer and let everybody know. And at this point, we thought, oh God, this is it. We're going to be hated. And I told her, we got to hunker down. We're not moving. I'm not running. So we stayed. And it was great because I talked to the one neighbor across the street. That's how I found out about this. And he just said, he was at our wedding. He just said, give me a little bit of time. Let me process all this. I said, okay. I said, I just want, I didn't lie to you. You never asked. Mm-hmm. So it took maybe about 6 months. And after that, things were kind of back to normal again. I mean, it never became a problem at the first house. All the neighbors were friendly. They all waved at us, talked to us. We would have block parties. We just decided that we wanted to get a bigger, better house. We wanted more of a country life. Now we're married, and now we have a son. So we wanted him to grow up in an environment different from what we grew up in. We want him to see horses. We wanted him to ride dirt bikes and four-wheelers. So we moved. And that's kind of where things started going bad.
Yeah, they took a turn again.
Yeah.
But I guess real quick, going back to, I know this is a while earlier in the conversation, when you had to go to treatment. So your probation officers, they were asking me questions related to like, how is he treating me? I'm like, well, this person is like mounds better than the person that I was with before, because this person does not verbally abuse me. This person does not like physically, nothing. He opens car doors for me. Like, I'm telling you, my now husband is a gentleman in all rounded aspects. Couldn't ask for anything better.
And he's misting up over here as you're talking. So because people can't see, but I just want to share that. Go ahead.
I was raised right.
And it shows. It shows.
There's a lot of love on screen for those people who are listening. Just want to share that.
100%.
And I mean, we're trying to raise our son the same way, right? But the registry is not for the faint of heart. So in our first home, we did have some issues with a vigilante, and we never found out who that was. But after a while, we just kept to ourselves. Like, and honestly, at one point, we even made really good friends with a woman and her son, who's the same age as ours, down the street. We're still best friends with them to this day. My son goes over their house. Like, we both have moved at this point. We do a lot of things together.
And we told her everything
A couple months
after we met her.
Yep. And
I didn't want it to come out later and have her second guess. Oh my God, my kid's been over there.
Mm-hmm.
So we came out, we talked to her and stuff, and it went good.
So I really appreciate you talking about, particularly now that you have a child, and how relationships with neighbors and friends are going, because in this episode, we talked about the registry. And if somebody stumbles upon this episode and doesn't necessarily know what the registry is, I just want to clarify a little bit. So when individuals are convicted of certain offenses, sexual offenses, they are required to register with the state, which then puts their information online for everyone to see, showing their crime, their address, and other various information. So one of the things that is striking me as very touching, Joe and Amy, is there's been a thread of transparency throughout this entire story, giving the information, disclosing to people, wanting to be honest, and just wanting to do the right thing. And so I appreciate you really highlighting that and sharing that with folks, because at the end of the day, information without context of who someone actually is stokes fear and is very harmful. So thank you for really sharing that part of your story.
And I just want to add on to that. I just know that it's never easy, right? Because for Joe having to disclose to Amy when they first met, and every single time you meet somebody, and you have to make that calculation, when is too soon? I've heard so many people ask this question, when is the right time? It's all this extra baggage. And it sounds like you have the secret sauce. Like you found it. You found what works for you.
So to touch on that, there was a few people we did not tell. And that would be her family.
Mm-hmm.
We never told her family. They know now. We opted not to tell the family. There was reasons around it. I didn't want them judging me. I wanted to build a trust factor.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a line, a juggling act. And we got to a point where we missed the opportunity to say something. Now it's, we're withholding information. And then through the years, I've worked a couple different places. A lot of families helped me find jobs. And I greatly appreciated for that. I had found a job working for a massive corporation. It was going to be my opportunity to step up in this family and really provide. I admitted everything on my application. They did a background check. They found it. They asked me to write a letter to them explaining what happened. So I wrote a letter. Shockingly, they hired me. And I was happy. One of my friends, actually, who I met in my therapy class, in my session, was working there. He just got hired about a year before me. Since he was there, he was on the registry. I knew I could get in. So we were both working there. And This went on for 11 and a half months. And then we started getting harassed by a coworker there. They found us on the registry. I decided to handle the proper way. And I went to HR along with him. We both went to HR. We both complained that we're being harassed. And they said, okay, this will not come back on you guys. You're protected. That lasted 2 days. 2 days later, we were phone called. We were off work and we were told we were fired. And we asked why. And they said, well, because you're criminal past. And I said, but you knew about our criminal past. You knew it. They said, well, we made a mistake when we hired you. I said, a mistake is a mistake you do once, not when you do it twice. And there's another person on the registry working at this corporation in the same complex as us. Are you firing them too? They said, well, no. So we were let go based upon that we were being harassed. And they couldn't prove who it was because they used like a Google spoofed phone number kind of thing. But we lost our jobs because of this. And then that caused a marital problem with me and Amy. We were fighting. And I don't like to bring it up, but she left the house for a few days. During that time period,
And hang on a second. So did it just become too much?
Yeah. At that point, I was like, look, it's the registry. I needed a little bit of a break. It's the label. Like, obviously, like, I feel like that company that he worked for just didn't want anything, because whoever was harassing him could obviously, like, they could honestly go public and just bash the company saying, you know, a bunch of people on the registry work here and it's not a great company. And I understand, I see that side, but at the same time, like, these are people. They didn't do anything. They were giving you, they had a great work ethic. Like, he got, I want to say, Joe, you got a promotion or two, or you were just he was on his way up.
They got an accommodation for being one of the harder working people during the inspection.
I've been going through school. I was trying to finish up my bachelor's degree at that time. And I needed a break. And at this time we had a son as well. So we were in a little bit of a gray area for a couple of days. So at that point, I'm just like, we got to tell my folks because I'm sick of hiding it.
I'm actually getting a little teared up hearing this, only because this is something that is very common. And I appreciate you not omitting how this life under the oppression of the registry can cause problems within a family. And the reason I'm tearing up is because I'm hearing a certain apologetic nature. Oh, we had this fight. You don't need to apologize, is my point. Because this life is very, very difficult. And the idea that it would cause strife within a family and tension is just expected. It's designed. And having worked with so many, particularly women who support people on the registry across the country, this is not a unique story. It's very, very difficult. This is part of the journey. So again, thank you for sharing that. And so you had to tell your family. And the reason it's difficult to tell family is because you actually care about what they think. Let's hear a little bit about when you told your family what happened.
I think we waited. Oh gosh.
It was 7 years.
7
and
years. Yeah. And
she made the decision. She was actually at her brother's house for a few days. And when she told me she was going to tell her family, that's when I thought, well, guess this marriage is over.
Yeah. I called my mom in the car and I told her, I'm like, look, because I was upset at the time. I'm like, this is what happened to him. And he has this still. And it's not fair. And I don't know what to do. And I just need a break for a while. And she's like, okay, hey, Amy, look at what you have. Look at what you've built. This person is not that person. And she just didn't care. She was just she was telling me all of the good things about Joe. And she was like, so what? And it's irrelevant at this point. What's happening to him isn't fair. And then I called my dad and he said the same things. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I know I have a good person in my life. He is my soulmate. He is my other half. I feel like I can tell him anything and he won't judge me.
I will say, when she told me about her dad, that was a big one for me. I respect her dad a lot. He's a very, very, very smart man. He's accomplished a ton in his life. He holds very high positions. He told me that he supports me 100%. He advised Amy to come back and give me another chance and to talk to me, and we could work through it. So I just want to say, like, it was a huge weight lifted, and it's just, I'm so emotional about it. More importantly, it made Amy feel better. It made her life a lot easier because she wasn't living a lie no more. And I'm very grateful for her family and for her. She's been huge in my life. She's been my rock.
Let's take this story to the action. So what are the things you're doing to make change?
So at that point, when the job loss happened, I tried to write some letters. I didn't really get much traction. We honestly were looking for attorneys at that point because I'm like, this was wrong. What happened to Joe? And I want something to come out of it. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get any traction there. And it just kind of died for a little while. But this was a blessing in disguise because Joe found another job through a friend of a family member. And he turned his life around again about 180 degrees. And now he has a professional career in a good industry where he'll always find work and probably makes double or triple what he did before. It can heavily support our family. It took me about 8 years to graduate from college because I was working full time, had a child. Life is difficult and trying to fit school in the mix is not easy. So I had finally graduated with my bachelor's degree and we wanted to move. We wanted to find our dream home. And we looked. We had a good realtor. She found us a great deal on a home. And we were like, this is it. We're going to move. We have our dream home. We moved from the city to a rural area. And this is going to be it.
Being in the situation that I was in, I felt amazing that I bought this myself, all by myself. I'm for once providing our dream home. And I was making more money than my college educated wife. And I did it. You know, it was a very proud moment for me to do that and to show my son, because we don't hide this from my son. Mm-hmm. My son knows everything. Mm-hmm. And he's young, but he knows everything. And to show to him that, hey, dad could still do this. Dad could still be a dad. And he can make good money and still support this family. It gave me such a good sense of well-being. And then the spin.
And then the spin. So we moved into our dream home and we were here for about, I think, 4 months. We had met some of the neighbors. Everyone out where we're at is generally nice, cordial. My son actually has a couple friends in the neighborhood and he goes and plays with the kids there. It's great. However, we have one neighbor who is somewhat of a vigilante, and the registry gave her a lot of fuel.
She got an alert that a offender had moved into the area, and that's where this all starts.
It started spiraling. So we actually had a property issue. So that is the number one issue that came about. And from the property issue, we didn't file suit till months later because of some actions that were taken from this vigilante person. And it's been terrible. Like, she has brought my son into this, and I'm actually going in therapy because I have a very hard time dealing with that. At this point, I'd love to move, but we have gone through, not to this extent before, but we have gone through something like this for a little bit in our first home. So at this point, we're just trying to stay and hunker down and get through it.
So I just have a quick question. You're referring to this person as a vigilante. So what you mean by that is this person has tried to leverage Joe's registry status with a lawsuit, or tried to spread information, or has this involved physical violence, or is it more reputational violence?
Yeah, so it's more as far as it's harassment and reputational. So we've had several police reports over the past year filed, and the police won't do anything about it. They've lied to the police, basically, from the understanding on my behalf, like from what I've read, because I'm very analytical. She's basically trying to get Joe in trouble for things that he didn't do. Right. And the police won't do anything about it. So at this point, we're just hunkering down and just trying to live our lives. But in this, because of the actions, I've also advanced my advocacy journey. So I signed up for a couple groups. I did join the UB4SOR advocacy group, and Sean Kim and everyone in that group have been wonderful. I also joined WAR, and Anne has been great, and all the speakers that come. I know both you and Jason, you and Amber have spoke. I haven't seen you speak, but I feel like for myself, that is a therapy in itself.
And I'll say the law enforcement out here where we are, very small community, they have been amazing. And I have no hatred towards law enforcement for what happened to me. I still have family who are in law enforcement. When we talked to them after we had our first police incident out here, one of the neighbors, and they found out, went to the police station to let them know that a person on the registry had moved in right behind her. And they said, well, there's nothing we can do about that. He has a right to live out here, same way you do. He's not doing anything wrong. So the police have been great. I have a 6-foot high privacy fence all the way around my property. That's one of the reasons why we bought the house, is we got the privacy fence. It's in the rural area and shouldn't have no problems out here.
So I think it's good to share that experience, because there is a perception amongst people who have experienced such an oppression that there's no help for them. There's nothing that can be done. And the fact of the matter is, sometimes that's true. Sometimes the stigma does influence people in systems, right? But sometimes it's not. Sometimes the buildup, and this is the emotional harm of the labeling and the registry and the stigma, people perceive that there's no help for them. People perceive that their family won't understand or their friends won't understand if they share the information. Thank you for sharing that. I want to go back to two things that Amy said, just because she did mention two groups using acronyms that people may not know what those acronyms mean. She referred to the United Voices for Sex Offense Reform, which is an advocacy group that does national work, and for people who are impacted by the registry and their families to be treated fairly and to change the laws. And then there is Women Against Registry, which she referred to, which is another great organization that is doing work and really specifically focusing on women and families who are banding together to say, this is affecting us too, and this is wrong. So I just wanted to just clear up those two great organizations that are doing some really good work.
Just to tie back to, thank you for that. So hopefully that luck continues to grow and your relationships continue to grow. And I hope that things are great from here on out. And I'm great to see both of you coming today to talk with us on the podcast, and the advocacy work that you're doing is just tremendous. You're giving back. So thank you.
I will say, through the years, I mean, I've been in the registry now for
this is your 15th
year. Not a proud moment, but I will say, though, through the years, like Amber said, I've had hard times registering. I've had agencies tell you could only register from 10 to 2, but not between 12 and 1 because we're at lunch. Well, I got to work because I didn't trust the city that I lived in. I used to drive an hour to the state police to register because I knew they would do it. I knew they would do it the right way. And they didn't judge me when I walked in there. They would treat me like a human. And then when I moved out here, the lady who handles it out here, I spoke to her the first time, she said, well, pardon me. She goes, it shows that you register at the state and you go an hour to do it. And I said, yeah, it's nothing against you. I don't trust city police. And she's like, okay, well, can I ask why? And I told her what happened to my previous residence. And she was like, well, I'm not that way. I don't do that. I firmly believe that you guys deserve a second chance. You guys did your time and you guys don't deserve to be on a list. It's not right. She's like, so if you want to come in here, I'd be more than happy to help you. If I need to come into work an hour early so you can do this, I'll do that for you, just so you are withholding up to your responsibilities. And that was like, wow, like somebody actually wants to help us out here. And that was a great thing to have. I'm happy I'm able to be a dad. I'm able to take my kid to school every morning and drop him off. And there's days I get to go and pick him up from school, which is not many because I work late, but there are days that I do, and I surprise him and he just runs out of school and just tackles me. But with that also became another problem. I mean, I went to go see him get an award and I was told I was not allowed in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him that Michigan law prohibits you from saying that. There's no law saying I cannot be in his school in Michigan, but they have the right, being it's their property. And they told me I couldn't go in and see it. And I never got to see my son get an award. Since then, I've talked to the school administration way up, and they actually said next time to contact them ahead of time, and they'll make arrangements and allow me to come into school so I can see it. I thought that's all I want. I will literally walk with a police officer to watch him get the award and walk out the building. I don't care. I just want to be able to see it. That's part of being a parent. So that was taken from me one time, and it's not going to happen again. I thought that too. So we keep fighting forward and knocking down walls.
I've actually contemplated switching my career to law because of what we've been through. I'm still debating it, but it's a heavy kind of sore subject in this house because it's a lot of schooling and we have a lot on our plate already.
And I'll say that with her being part of these groups, this gave her a voice. It gave her people to talk to. And honestly, it opened up this podcast because she brought it up to me and I originally told her, no, I don't want to do it. And then I was sitting in traffic one day and I texted her and said, what's the name of the podcast? Because she knows I love podcasts. And there's other podcasts I listen to that kind of along the same lines. And I listened to your guys' podcast and I loved it. And that's when I reached out to Jason. I wanted to learn more about you two. I want to know who I was talking to. That's my self-trust issues is I want to know who I was talking to. And I just want to say thank you to you guys for giving not only me, but giving everybody else a platform who may not be in my situation, but maybe in any situation, a platform to come out and speak because these voices need to be heard. And it's a large group and we need to stand up. And one of the biggest influences in my life is Jelly Roll, the music artist, and what he's been through. He's brought to life a lot of his life and how he's rebuilt his life and people aren't judging him for it. And that's kind of where I'm at now is I want people to know what's happened and how, this has affected me not only for the 6 months I was in jail, it's affected me 15 years later. And I still got 10 more years to go. And yet my wife and son, they were never part of that, but yet it's affecting them. And that's not right. So that's why I agreed to do this was because you guys, your background, and that I'm very grateful for. You gave me an opportunity to share my story. I hope it gives somebody hope. I was able to rebound and rebuild my life. My brother always says, it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how hard you fight to get back up on your feet. Right. And that's what I'm doing.
Amber, I don't think we need a wrap up.
I think Joe did it. I don't even have to ask my final question. That was so beautiful. And I just want to thank you guys. This is the first time that we've had a couple come on together, and we've covered a lot of ground, particularly about family life on the registry that we have not covered before. And I know for me personally, it's been very meaningful to me as a person who lives under similar oppression. And I'm very excited to hear that you're taking your power back, because this is one of the worst injustices of the registry, is that people don't believe that they deserve a place at the table. So whether that table is in family life, whether it's at your kid's school, whether that table is criminal legal reform, we need to recognize harm as harm. So whatever harm was caused during whatever brought someone into the legal system is dealt with in a certain way. But what we're not paying attention to is the state harm that is happening from the system. And so your story is a part of that. And so many stories of the guests that we've seen here in advocacy and around the country. So it's really great to have had you here. Jason, any last thoughts before we go?
I'm just going to say thank you, Amy. Thank you, Joe. And until next time, Amber.
We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Amplified Voices, a podcast lifting the experiences of people and families impacted by the criminal legal system. For more information, episodes, and podcast notes, visit amplifiedvoices.show.